Team orders have been around in Formula 1 since the very beginning. They're a controversial but necessary outlier used by teams to give one driver an advantage over the other. But once again, they are back in the spotlight, albeit not for the reasons that we've come to expect. McLaren's seemingly lack of interest to use them at their disposal during the recent Italian Grand Prix received a lot of backlash from fans. But why exactly? Well, let's look at this in a little bit more depth. This latest outcry has come after McLaren refused, and not for the first time this season, to adopt team orders at the Italian Grand Prix when its drivers lined up on the front row together. But the lead McLaren in the standings and on the grid, in this case Lando Norris, looked a dejected figure on the podium as he lost a real opportunity to take more points off his championship rival Max Verstappen as he finished third despite starting on pole. First of all, he was caught by surprise on lap 1 by his teammate Oscar Piastri as he pulled off a sensational pass around the outside at the second chicane, and just to rub salt into the wound, not only did he finish behind Piastri, but he also finished behind race winner Charles Leclerc, who won the race by pulling off a one-stop strategy. This failure by McLaren to use clear team orders at times this season has seen Lando lose crucial points as he bids to hunt down and overturn his deficit to Verstappen. The fact that McLaren has not thrown all of its time and effort behind Norris and has instead ensured Piastri is treated just as equally has caused some debate over whether it now is the time for it to make a tough but fair call of ordering Piastri to help Norris in his title bid, even if the odds are stacked against him. We instead saw a first glimpse at Monza of what the team called papaya rules, where the team gave the drivers clear instructions as to how they could race, rather than sending a clear message to swap the cars around. Teams are usually quite quick to employ team orders when one of their drivers has a clear shot at winning the World Championship. Ferrari, during its dominant period in the 2000s, handed out team orders even when Michael Schumacher had a clear lead over the opposition. But in McLaren's case, it is refusing to budge from its mantra that it has two number one drivers, even if Lando, from the outside at least, looks its best hope to win the World Championship. Now this is clearly a disadvantage compared to Red Bull, for example, because Verstappen in that team is clearly the number one driver, so he is bound to have and will have the support from Checo when and if he needs it. If McLaren had already decided that Norris was its best hope to become its first world champion since Lewis Hamilton in 2008, it would have meant that Piastri wouldn't have been so bold and aggressive with his move on the first lap at Monza, which to all intents and purposes was a perfectly legitimate move given the circumstances, and he had every right to do so. I mean, even if McLaren hasn't used team orders up until now, Piastri doesn't appear to be too interested in giving Norris a helping hand. After the race at Monza, Norris was asked if he would have liked McLaren to have intervened and swapped the cars around in a bid to bolster his title chances. And although Lando said he obviously would have loved McLaren to have intervened and given him a clear advantage, he admitted it was a tough call. He also referenced that although time was still on its side to an extent, it was becoming apparent that they had to make a decision sooner rather than later. Lando effectively said that team orders was a decision for the team to make and not him. Interestingly, when Piastri was asked to respond to the same question, he simply replied with no comment. Speaking of Lando's reference to time running out, the championship standings with 8 races to go reads like this. Norris is 62 points behind Verstappen, while Piastri is a further 44 points back, giving him a 106 point deficit to Max, which is surely a big enough gap for it to ultimately tell Piastri he has to play a supporting role from now on. McLaren is at risk of losing what you would have to say is a real shot at winning a driver's crown if it doesn't fully back Norris from now on. It has made real hard work of recent races, including Monza, especially when it has clearly had the fastest car and hasn't taken advantage of this, allowing its rivals to take points off them. Ferrari, with their recent upgrade that they bought specifically for Monza, now look an outside bet for the Constructors' Championship, as they are just 39 points behind Red Bull. And to top it off, Leclerc is now only 24 points behind Lando after his win at Monza. And don't count out Mercedes, because while they're not in the run for the championship, they will for sure be in touch with a real shot at race victories in the remaining races. Red Bull are clearly now vulnerable as their form really has nosedived over the last few races, and they look lost as to how they can rectify their current problems. But the more McLaren doesn't make the most of having the best car at the moment, the more likely it is that Norris will be unable to cut down Verstappen's lead. And after all, Ferrari and Mercedes will be in the mix, so they have to take every opportunity they can for the rest of the season. They don't seem to want to upset either of their drivers, which to a point is understandable. They don't want Norris to feel as though he isn't being supported by the team, but at the same time they don't want Piastri to feel as though he's being made to feel like a number 2 driver. It is an extremely difficult tightrope to walk for a team, especially if they do not handle it well. But there comes a point where they simply have to rule in favour of the other if their championship prospects are greater. And any team in McLaren's position right now would have done so. From the outside, you'd have to say that McLaren are fortunate to be in a luxurious position of having one, or if not, the best driver lineup on the grid, which only makes it tougher for them when only one of their drivers has a realistic shot at the title. But past examples show that this kind of scenario can work if it is handled in the right manner, even if, like McLaren, you have 2 top drivers to deal with. Rewind back to 2007, which is one of the most exciting and controversial Formula 1 seasons of all time, and Ferrari and McLaren were locked in an intense title fight. Both teams had 2-star drivers on their books. At Ferrari, they had Kimi Raikkonen and Felipe Massa, while at McLaren they had the reigning champion Fernando Alonso and rookie sensation Lewis Hamilton. It was a season of twists and turns, but McLaren clearly had, on average at least, the faster package. But Ferrari were quick enough to be in the championship picture. Going into the final 3 races, all 4 drivers were still mathematically in contention for the World Championship, but Massa had begun to lose ground that made him the rank outsider. This meant that Ferrari made a tough decision. It decided that Raikkonen, although he was only 7 points ahead of Massa at this point in the year, they decided that he was now the more realistic bet to overhaul both of the McLarens to the title. Ferrari's bold decision to back Raikkonen over Massa would prove a masterstroke, even if you have to say, looking back, that it was helped by McLaren's late season implosion through operational mistakes, an acrimonious atmosphere among its drivers, and some bad luck, as Massa played the support act as Raikkonen did the unthinkable and overcame a 17-point deficit with 2 races to go to snatch the World Championship from McLaren's grasp by just 1 single point. McLaren showed at this point how having 2 top drivers in a title fight can prove a real headache, as Alonso and Hamilton took points off each other rather than the opposition. It's a clear lesson for the future perhaps, as McLaren, at this moment in time at least, is not in a position to fight for the World Championship with both drivers. So now you would have to say that McLaren would do very well not to follow their own example of mishandling this kind of situation and simply use Piastri as Norris's support act. If he can take points off Max, this will only elevate Lando's hopes of an unlikely maiden title win. As Lando said in the post-race press conference at Monza, time is running out. Opportunities like this do not come around every so often, and there's absolutely no guarantee that McLaren will be in an even stronger position in 2025. Their rapid upswing in form since the middle of 2023 really has been nothing short of outstanding, and McLaren are clearly now the team to beat. But now they have a clear fight on their hands that could not only cost them an unlikely but deserving title, but also its drivers' trust. Simply put it is now or never. So there you have it, that's my current take on the current situation that is evolving at McLaren. I really do think that they really need to consider using team orders sooner rather than later, otherwise this title shot really is going to disappear, and I think they will have a lot of regret over how they handle the situation if they do end up missing out on the championship. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section as well, and don't forget to like the video if you are new around here and to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching guys, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.